Blood stained Thaddeus James's knuckles as he slammed his fist into the wooden beam of his Texas ranch house, the news of his wife's passing in childbirth still ringing in his ears like a death knell. The year was 1875, and at 34 years old, he was now a widower with 3 children to raise on his own, including a newborn who would never know her mother's face. Pa. His eldest, 6-year-old Samuel, stood in the doorway of the humble ranch house, eyes wide with fear. "Is Ma really gone to heaven?" Thaddeus turned, quickly hiding his bloodied hand behind his back. The calluses that lined his palms from years of ranch work had split open from the force of his blow, but that pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache in his chest. "Yes, son," he managed, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Your ma's gone to be with the angels." Behind Samuel stood 4-year-old Abigail, her dark hair so like her mother's falling in messy curls around her tear-stained face. "Who's gonna take care of baby Emma?" she asked, her small voice trembling. "I am," Thaddeus said, straightening his shoulders despite feeling as though the weight of the entire Texas sky was pressing down upon them. "I'm going to take care of all of you." The promise was made with conviction, though he had no earthly idea how he would keep it. His wife, Eleanor, had been the heart of their home, while he spent his days working their modest cattle spread outside the growing settlement of Cottonwood Springs. Ranching was what he knew: roping, riding, the harsh elements of the Texas plains, not caring for a newborn or comforting small children through the loss of their mother. That night, as he sat in the rocking chair Eleanor had loved, cradling baby Emma while his other 2 children finally slept, Thaddeus made a solemn vow. "I may not know what I'm doing," he whispered to his tiny daughter, her face still red and wrinkled from birth, "but I swear on your mother's grave I'll keep you all safe. That's a promise." The days that followed blurred together in an exhausting cycle of grief and responsibility. Thaddeus learned to change diapers with the same calloused hands that broke horses. He cooked simple meals: beans, cornbread, and whatever game he could hunt, and made sure his children were fed before himself. He washed clothes in the creek behind their home and hung them to dry in the Texas sun, all while trying to keep the ranch running. His nearest neighbor, old Jim Peterson, helped when he could, but the elderly man had his own place to tend. The women from town brought food after the funeral, but their visits grew fewer as the weeks passed. Cottonwood Springs was still a 3-hour ride from the James Ranch, too far for regular help. By the time 3 months had passed, Thaddeus had settled into a routine of sorts. He would rise before dawn, feed the baby, get the older children dressed and fed, then tackle ranch chores with Samuel trailing behind him, trying to help with his small hands. Abigail would mind Emma for short spells, singing the lullabies she remembered her mother singing. They survived, but they were far from thriving. "Samuel, keep an eye on your sisters," Thaddeus instructed one morning in early summer as he saddled his horse. "I need to round up the strays from the north pasture. I'll be back before sundown." "Yes, Pa," Samuel replied, shoulders squared with the importance of his task, though his eyes betrayed his worry. "Abigail, you remember how to warm the milk for Emma if she gets hungry." The little girl nodded solemnly, her doll clutched tightly to her chest. Thaddeus hesitated, as he always did when leaving them. The ranch was falling behind without his full attention, but his children needed him too. Every day was a compromise that left him feeling like he was failing at everything. It was on this day, as Thaddeus rode out to the pasture, that fate sent Winifred Johnson to Cottonwood Springs. Winifred stepped off the stagecoach, dust immediately coating her sensible traveling boots. At 26, she had left her home in Boston after her father's death left her with little more than debts and a teaching certificate that had cost her years of study. The advertisement for a schoolteacher in Cottonwood Springs, Texas, had promised a fresh start, and after the suffocating memories of Boston, that was exactly what she needed. "Miss Johnson," a portly man with a generous mustache approached her. "I'm Mayor Hollister. Welcome to Cottonwood Springs." "Thank you, Mayor," Winifred replied, adjusting her hat against the fierce Texas sun. "I'm eager to begin my duties." "Well, the schoolhouse isn't much," he admitted, gesturing toward a small wooden building at the end of the town's single street, but the children are eager to learn. School term starts in 2 weeks, which should give you time to settle in. As they walked toward the boarding house where she would stay, Winifred noticed a man with 3 children outside the general store. The man looked exhausted, his clothes worn but clean, his face weathered beyond his years. He struggled to manage a basket of supplies while holding an infant and keeping an eye on 2 older children. "Who is that?" she asked the mayor. "That's Thaddeus James," Mayor Hollister replied with a sympathetic shake of his head. "Lost his wife in childbirth about 3 months back. Has a small ranch outside of town. Proud man, won't accept much help, though Lord knows he needs it." Winifred watched as the little girl with Thaddeus dropped her doll in the dirt. The man tried to bend down to retrieve it while balancing the baby in the basket, nearly losing both. Without thinking, Winifred quickened her pace and reached the doll first. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, dusting off the cloth doll before handing it to the wide-eyed child. "Thank you, madam," the girl whispered, clutching the doll to her chest. Thaddeus James looked up, and Winifred was struck by the intensity of his blue eyes, though they were shadowed with fatigue and grief. "Much obliged," he said, his voice deep and rusty, as if from disuse. "You look like you could use an extra hand," Winifred offered, gesturing to his precarious load. Pride flashed across his face, and for a moment she thought he would refuse. Then the baby squirmed, letting out a hungry cry, and practicality won out. "If you wouldn't mind holding the basket while I get them situated in the wagon," he conceded. Winifred took the basket, introducing herself as she did. "I'm the new schoolteacher, just arrived today. These 2 will be in your class come fall," Thaddeus said, nodding toward the older children. "Samuel and Abigail, and this little one is Emma." "It's a pleasure to meet all of you," Winifred said, smiling warmly at the children. Samuel gave a solemn nod while Abigail hid partially behind her father's leg, still clutching her doll. Thaddeus loaded his purchases into a weathered wagon, then turned back to Winifred. "Thank you for your assistance, Miss Johnson. Welcome to Cottonwood Springs." With that, he helped his children into the wagon and climbed up himself, the baby securely nestled in one arm. Winifred watched them drive away, struck by the determined set of Thaddeus's shoulders despite the obvious weight he carried. "Poor man," Mayor Hollister commented as they resumed their walk to the boarding house. "Those children haven't had a proper woman's care in months. The oldest boy's been missing school to help with the ranch, and folks say that baby cries all night long." "Doesn't he have family to help?" Winifred asked. "None nearby. His parents are long gone and his wife's family is back east somewhere. He's too proud to write to them for help, from what I understand." That night, as Winifred unpacked her few belongings in her small room at the boarding house, her thoughts kept returning to Thaddeus James and his children. She had come to Texas seeking a new beginning, focused solely on establishing herself as a teacher. She hadn't expected to be immediately drawn to the plight of a struggling family. "It's not your concern, Winnie," she told herself firmly, using the nickname her father had called her. "You have your own fresh start to worry about." Yet as she prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the image of those 3 children and their father, trying to make their way without the mother and wife they had lost. 2 days later, Winifred was exploring the town when she spotted Samuel James alone outside the general store, sitting on the boardwalk with his knees drawn up to his chest. "Hello, Samuel," she greeted him. "Are you waiting for your father?" The boy looked up, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Yes, madam. He's inside with the girls. Emma was crying something fierce, so Mrs. Tompkins took them to the back room." "I see," Winifred said, sitting down beside him. "And you're standing guard out here?" Samuel nodded seriously. "Pa says I'm the man of the house when he's not around." "That's a big responsibility for someone your age," Winifred observed gently. "I'm almost 7, Samuel replied with the dignity only a child can muster. "And Pa needs help. Ma dying made him real sad." The simple statement, delivered with such matter-of-factness, caught Winifred off guard. "I'm sure he's very proud of you," she managed. Samuel shrugged, scuffing his boot against the dirt. "He don't smile much anymore. Ma used to make him laugh all the time." Before Winifred could respond, the door to the general store opened, and Thaddeus emerged with Abigail at his side and Emma in his arms. The baby was quieter now, but still fussing. Samuel, time to Thaddeus, stopped when he noticed Winifred. Miss Johnson. Mr. James, she replied, standing quickly and brushing dust from her skirt. I was just keeping Samuel company while he waited for you. Thaddeus's expression softened slightly. That's kind of you. We need to be heading back to the ranch now. Actually, Winifred said, an idea forming suddenly. I was wondering if I might speak with you about Samuel and Abigail's education, since I'll be their teacher this fall. Thaddeus hesitated, clearly eager to get home but reluctant to appear rude. I suppose we could spare a few minutes. Perhaps I could walk with you to your wagon, Winifred suggested. As they walked, Winifred carefully broached her real purpose. Mr. James, I couldn't help but notice that you have your hands quite full with 3 children and a ranch to run. His posture stiffened immediately. We're managing just fine, Miss Johnson. I'm sure you are, she replied quickly. But I have a proposal that might be mutually beneficial. I'm a trained teacher, but I was also the eldest of 6 children. I helped raise my younger siblings after my mother took ill. I'm quite experienced with childcare. Thaddeus stopped walking, regarding her with suspicion. What exactly are you suggesting? Winifred took a deep breath. I have 2 weeks before school begins, and I find myself with little to do beyond preparing lessons. I could come to your ranch a few days each week to help with the children. It would give you more time for your ranch work, and it would give me something useful to do with my time. We don't need charity, Miss Johnson, Thaddeus said firmly. It's not charity, Winifred countered. Consider it an exchange. You could provide transportation to and from town for me and perhaps some fresh eggs or milk when available. The boarding house fare is rather. She searched for a diplomatic term, limited. Thaddeus studied her face, looking for hidden motives. Finding none, he glanced down at Emma, who was beginning to fuss again. And you have experience with babies? He asked, his voice less certain. My youngest brother was an infant when my mother fell ill. I cared for him from 3 months old, Winifred confirmed. For a long moment, Thaddeus said nothing. Then Emma let out a wail, and Abigail tugged at his pant leg, whining that she was tired and wanted to go home. Tuesday, he said finally. I can come for you Tuesday morning if you're serious about this offer. I am, Winifred assured him. I'll be ready at 8 o'clock. True to his word, Thaddeus arrived at the boarding house promptly at 8 on Tuesday morning. Winifred was waiting on the porch, a small bag packed with items she thought might be useful, a few children's books, some colored pencils, and a jar of honey from her landlady's hives that she thought might sweeten the children's day. The ride to the James ranch took nearly 3 hours, much of it in silence. Samuel sat between Winifred and Thaddeus on the wagon bench, while Abigail and Emma were settled in the back on a makeshift bed of blankets. Occasionally, Samuel would point out landmarks or animals, which Winifred acknowledged with appropriate interest. Thaddeus spoke little, but Winifred noticed how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to any potential danger. His hands, gripping the reins, were rough and calloused, with several fresh cuts and scrapes. Those were the hands that now did everything for his children, from ranch work to the gentlest tasks of parenthood. When they crested a small hill, Thaddeus finally broke his silence. That's our place, he said, nodding toward a modest homestead nestled in a small valley. A creek ran behind the main house and a few cattle grazed in the distance. It wasn't large or grand, but Winifred could see it had been built and maintained with care. It's lovely, she said sincerely. How long have you been here? Built it myself 8 years ago, right after Alina and I married, Thaddeus replied, a fleeting softness crossing his face at the mention of his wife's name. As they approached the house, Winifred noticed the small details: the vegetable garden that needed weeding, the clothesline with tiny garments flapping in the breeze, the rocking chair on the porch where Alina had probably sat on countless evenings. I need to check the north fence line today, Thaddeus explained as he helped her down from the wagon. Coyotes have been getting to the calves. I should be back by midday. We'll be fine, Winifred assured him. Is there anything specific you'd like me to do while you're gone? Thaddeus seemed momentarily taken aback by the question, as if unused to having help offered. Emma usually takes a morning nap after her feeding, he said. There's clean diapers on the shelf by the cradle, and the children haven't had a proper bath in a while. Consider it done, Winifred said with a warm smile. Samuel can show me around, I'm sure. Thaddeus nodded, then knelt to speak to his children. You mind Miss Johnson while I'm gone, he instructed. Samuel, show her where everything is. Abigail, be a good helper with Emma. Both children nodded solemnly. Thaddeus rose, placed his hat firmly on his head, and with one last assessing look at Winifred, mounted his horse and rode toward the north pasture. Well, Winifred said to the children, shall we go inside and get started on our day? The interior of the James home was simple but clean, though Winifred could see evidence of a man struggling to maintain a household while raising 3 children. Mending was piled in a basket by the fireplace, dishes from breakfast were stacked by the washbasin, and toys were scattered across the wooden floor. Emma began to fuss, and Winifred took her gently from Samuel's arms. When was she last fed? She asked. Pa gave her some milk before we left for town, Samuel replied, but she doesn't like the cow's milk much, makes her belly hurt sometimes. Winifred checked the baby's diaper, finding it soaked. Let's start by getting you dry and comfortable, she cooed to Emma, who regarded her with wide, curious eyes. As the day progressed, Winifred fell into an easy rhythm with the children. She changed and fed Emma, then settled her for a nap in the cradle Thaddeus had clearly made himself. She helped Samuel and Abigail tidy the main room, turning it into a game that had them giggling for the first time since she'd met them. By the time Thaddeus returned, she had bathed both older children, washed the breakfast dishes, started a stew for dinner, and was sitting on the porch with Emma in her lap while Samuel and Abigail colored with the pencils she had brought. Thaddeus dismounted slowly, taking in the scene before him with an unreadable expression. Seems like you've been busy, he commented as he approached. We've had a wonderful morning, Winifred replied, bouncing Emma gently. Your children are delightful company. Pa, look what I drew. Abigail exclaimed, holding up a colorful rendition of what might have been a horse or possibly a large dog. That's real nice, Abby, Thaddeus said, his voice softening as he took the drawing. He turned to Winifred. Thank you for today. It's more help than we've had in a long while. It was my pleasure, Winifred said sincerely. I'd be happy to return on Thursday if that suits you. Thaddeus nodded, and though his face remained serious, she caught a glimpse of relief in his eyes. Thursday would be fine. Over the next 2 weeks, Winifred settled into a routine of visiting the James Ranch on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Each visit revealed more about the family and their life together. She learned that Thaddeus had been a respected horse trainer before focusing on cattle ranching. She discovered that Samuel had his father's quiet determination, that Abigail loved to sing, but only when she thought no one was listening, and that baby Emma had recently discovered her own toes with great delight. She also learned about leaner bits and pieces shared by the children or occasionally by Thaddeus himself. Eleanor had been an accomplished pianist who taught Samuel his letters before he was 5. She had sewn all of Abigail's dresses and made strawberry preserves that won prizes at the county fair. She had laughed easily and loved deeply, and her absence was a wound that hadn't begun to heal for any of them. On her 5th visit to the ranch, Winifred arrived to find Thaddeus struggling with Emma, who was crying inconsolably. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually neat shirt was rumpled and stained. She's been crying all night, he explained, his voice ragged with exhaustion. Nothing helps. I think she might be sick. Winifred took the baby, laying a hand on her forehead. She does feel warm. Let me try something my mother used to do. She mixed a small amount of honey with warm water and dipped a clean cloth into the mixture, then let Emma suck on the cloth. The sweet solution seemed to soothe the baby, who gradually quieted. She might be teething, Winifred suggested. The honey will help with the pain. My mother swore by it. Thaddeus sank into a chair, relief evident on his face. I didn't know what to do, he admitted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. When the other 2 were teething, Eleanor knew exactly what they needed. You're doing the best you can, Winifred said gently. No one expects you to know everything. They deserve better than my best, Thaddeus replied, his voice barely audible. They deserve their mother. The raw pain in his words touched Winifred deeply. Without thinking, she reached out and laid her hand over his His skin was rough with calluses but warm beneath her touch. "They have a father who loves them enough to try," she said. "That matters more than you know." Thaddeus looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm upward, his fingers curling slightly around hers. The gesture lasted only a moment before he pulled away, but something had shifted between them, a barrier breached, however briefly. "I should get to work," he said, standing abruptly. "The south pasture needs clearing before winter." As he left, Winifred wondered if she had overstepped. But later that day, when Thaddeus returned for the midday meal she had prepared, he seemed more at ease in her presence than before. As they ate, Samuel regaled them with a story about a frog he had found by the creek, and Abigail laughed so hard milk came out of her nose, which made everyone, including Thaddeus, burst into laughter. It was the first time Winifred had heard him truly laugh, and the sound transformed his face, erasing years of worry and grief. In that moment, watching him with his children, Winifred realized with startling clarity that she was developing feelings for Thaddeus James that went beyond sympathy or friendship. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had come to Texas to build a new life centered around her teaching career, not to fall for a widowed rancher with 3 children. The next week, school began in Cottonwood Springs, and Winifred's visits to the ranch necessarily became less frequent. Samuel and Abigail now rode into town with their father twice weekly to attend school, and Winifred would accompany them back to the ranch on Friday afternoons, staying until Sunday when Thaddeus would bring her back to town. These weekend visits took on a different character than her earlier ones. Rather than simply helping with the children, Winifred found herself becoming part of the family's routines. She and Thaddeus would sit on the porch after the children were asleep, talking about books they had read, places they had seen, and gradually, more personal matters. "Did you always want to be a teacher?" Thaddeus asked one crisp autumn evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Always," Winifred confirmed. "My father was a professor before his investments failed. He taught me to value education above all else." "Your mother didn't mind you pursuing teaching instead of marriage." "My mother died when I was 20, Winifred said softly. "She always said I should follow my heart, whatever path it chose. What about you? Did you always want to be a rancher?" Thaddeus was quiet for a moment. "I wanted adventure when I was young. Rode with a cattle drive when I was 18, thought I might keep moving west. Then I met a leaner at a dance in San Antonio, and suddenly putting down roots didn't seem so confining." The mention of a leaner no longer brought immediate pain to his eyes, Winifred noticed. Instead, there was a gentle fondness, a cherishing of memory rather than a reopening of wounds. "She must have been remarkable," Winifred said. "She was," Thaddeus agreed. "She would have liked you." She always said children needed teachers who saw them as individuals, not just empty vessels to be filled with facts. "That's very wise," Winifred replied, touched by the comparison. "I try to understand each child's unique strengths." "I've noticed," Thaddeus said, his voice warming. "Samuel talks about your lessons all week. You've got him reading books I wouldn't have attempted at his age." "He's very bright," Winifred said, "and determined like his father." Their eyes met in the gathering darkness, and for a moment, Winifred thought Thaddeus might say something more personal. Instead, he stood and offered his hand to help her rise. "It's getting cold," he said. "We should go inside." As autumn deepened toward winter, changes came to the James household. Emma spoke her first word, "da," while reaching for Thaddeus across the dinner table. Samuel brought home perfect marks on his arithmetic test. Abigail overcame her shyness to recite a poem at the harvest festival in town. And Thaddeus began to smile more often. His hands, still calloused from ranch work, grew gentler. Winifred noticed how he would now brush Abigail's hair back from her forehead with a feather-light touch, or how he cradled Emma against his chest with perfect tenderness. The harshness that grief had etched into his features was softening, revealing the man he had been before loss had reshaped him. For her part, Winifred found herself thinking about the James family constantly, even when she was busy with her teaching duties in town. She saved interesting stories to share with Samuel, collected pretty ribbons she thought would please Abigail, and kept a small journal of Emma's developments that she updated during her weekend visits. And she thought about Thaddeus, his quiet strength, his unwavering devotion to his children, the rare but transformative smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. She thought about the calluses on his hands and how they represented years of hard work and sacrifice. She wondered what it would be like to have those hands hold hers, not briefly in passing but deliberately, with intention. As November arrived, bringing the first real chill of winter, Winifred began to wonder how long this arrangement could continue. She had established herself as a respected teacher in Cottonwood Springs. The school board was pleased with her work, and she had been offered a contract for the following year. Her life in town was comfortable and fulfilling. Yet each Sunday, when Thaddeus drove her back to the boarding house, she felt as if she were leaving home rather than returning to it. One Friday afternoon, as Winifred was gathering her things at the schoolhouse to leave with Thaddeus and the children, Mayor Hollister stopped by with news. "Miss Johnson, I've just received word that the county superintendent will be visiting our school next Tuesday," he informed her. "He's considering our request for additional funding for books and supplies." "That's wonderful news," Winifred replied, genuinely pleased. "I'll prepare the students on Monday." "There's one more thing," the mayor added, lowering his voice slightly. "The superintendent is a widower about your age, very well respected in educational circles. I may have mentioned that our new teacher is not only competent but also a lovely young woman." Winifred felt her cheeks warm. "Mayor Hollister, I'm not sure that's appropriate now," he interrupted with a paternal smile. "No harm in making a good impression. A young woman of your quality shouldn't spend her life alone. Teaching is an honorable profession, but family is what truly matters in this life." Before Winifred could respond, Thaddeus entered the schoolhouse, having tied the wagon outside. His expression was unreadable as he nodded to the mayor. "Mr. James," Mayor Hollister greeted him. "Just sharing some news with Miss Johnson about a visitor we're expecting next week." "Is that so?" Thaddeus replied, his voice oddly formal. He turned to Winifred. "The children are waiting in the wagon. We should get started if we want to reach the ranch before dark." The ride to the ranch was unusually quiet. Even the children seemed to sense the tension between the adults, speaking in whispers to each other rather than sharing their usual excited accounts of the school day. When they arrived at the ranch, Thaddeus helped Winifred down from the wagon with the same courtesy as always, but his touch was brief, and he avoided meeting her eyes. That evening, after the children were in bed, Winifred found Thaddeus on the porch, staring out at the darkened landscape. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the night chill and joined him. "Is something troubling you?" she asked directly. "You've been quiet since we left town." Thaddeus continued looking straight ahead. "Mayor Hollister seems eager to see you settled with this superintendent." "Mayor Hollister has taken it upon himself to manage my future," Winifred replied with a touch of irritation. "I have no interest in being settled by his arrangement." "Don't you?" Thaddeus finally turned to face her. "A superintendent would be a good match for a teacher. Similar interests, stable position. Probably has a fine house in the county seat." "I'm not looking for a good match or a fine house," Winifred said, frustrated by his assumption. "I came to Texas to build my own life, not to find a husband." "Yet here you are, spending every weekend with a widower and his children," Thaddeus observed, his voice tight. "What exactly are you building, Winifred?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "I'm building relationships that matter to me," she answered honestly. "With Samuel and Abigail and Emma, and with you." Thaddeus fell silent, his hands gripping the porch railing. When he spoke again, his voice was low and uncertain. "I can't offer what a man like that superintendent could. This ranch barely supports us as it is. I work from sunup to sundown most days. I have 3 children who depend on me entirely." "Do you think I don't know that?" Winifred stepped closer to him. "I've been here every weekend for months. I've seen your life, all of it, the struggles and the joys." "Then you should understand why I can't," he broke off, shaking his head. "Why you can't what?" Winifred pressed, her heart pounding. Thaddeus turned to her, his face vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. Why I can't ask you to share this life, to take on someone else's children, to live so far from town and the life you've built there. Perhaps, Winifred said carefully, you should let me decide what life I want to build rather than assuming I would choose comfort over what matters most. And what matters most to you, Winifred? Thaddeus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering with words, Winifred took a step closer and gently placed her hand over his where it rested on the railing. His skin was rough beneath her palm, but he turned his hand to clasp hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. I've watched you care for your children with these hands, she said softly. I've seen how gentle you can be despite the calluses and the scars. These hands tell the story of who you are, Thaddeus, strong enough to build a life, tender enough to comfort a crying child. Thaddeus looked down at their joined hands. Eleanor used to say my hands were too rough, he admitted. She would rub salve into them in the evenings. They're perfect as they are, Winifred said. They're yours. Slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, Thaddeus raised his free hand to her face, his calloused thumb gently stroking her cheek. I never expected to feel this way again, he confessed. After Eleanor died, I thought that part of me died with her. And now? Winifred asked, leaning slightly into his touch. Now I find myself thinking about you when you're not here, he said. Wondering what you'd think of a sunset or how you'd explain something to the children. I find myself hoping you'll stay, even while I tell myself it's selfish to want that. It's not selfish to want happiness, Thaddeus, Winifred said. For yourself or your children. Is that what you want too? He asked, vulnerability plain in his voice. This life, us, I want the life I've found here, Winifred answered truthfully. Teaching the children in town during the week, and coming home to this ranch to you and Samuel and Abigail and Emma at week's end. I want to help raise those children and build something lasting with you. Thaddeus's other hand came up to frame her face. I love you, Winifred, he said simply. I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. I love you too, she replied, her heart full to bursting. All of you, your strength, your gentleness, even your stubbornness. When he kissed her, it was tentative at first, as if he had forgotten how. Then, as she responded, his confidence grew and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of both tender affection and passionate promise. A small gasp from the doorway broke them apart. Abigail stood there in her nightgown, eyes wide. Are you going to be our new mama? She asked directly. Thaddeus looked momentarily dismayed at the interruption, but Winifred squeezed his hand reassuringly. Would you like that, Abigail? She asked gently. The little girl considered this seriously. Would you live here all the time, even when it's not the weekend? Yes, Winifred said. If your father asks me to marry him, and if you children would welcome me as part of your family, I would live here always. Then I think that would be all right, Abigail declared magnanimously. Thaddeus lifted his daughter into his arms. It's more than all right, Abby, he said, his voice rough with emotion. It's a blessing I never thought we'd have. Over Abigail's head, his eyes met Winifred's, full of love and gratitude. In that moment, Winifred knew she had found what she had truly been seeking when she journeyed to Texas, not just a job or a fresh start, but a family to love, a place to belong, and a man whose calloused hands would hold her heart with the gentlest of care for all the years to come. By the following spring, wildflowers carpeted the meadows around the James Ranch, and a simple gold band graced Winifred's finger. She divided her time between teaching in town and nurturing her new family at home, having married Thaddeus in a small ceremony at Christmas attended by the children, Mayor Hollister, and a handful of friends from Cottonwood Springs. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Winifred's organizational skills and education helped with the bookkeeping and planning, while Thaddeus's hard work and knowledge of the land continued to be the backbone of their operation. They added a room to the house, planted an expanded vegetable garden, and even found time to give the entire home a fresh coat of paint. But the true transformation was in the family itself. Samuel thrived with Winifred's encouragement of his studies, developing an interest in veterinary medicine that she nurtured with books and practical lessons. Abigail blossomed under her stepmother's gentle guidance, losing her shyness and revealing a talent for storytelling that delighted everyone. Emma, not yet 2, began calling Winifred Mama without prompting, as naturally as she called Thaddeus Papa. And Thaddeus himself changed perhaps the most of all. The grief that had hardened him began to soften, not erasing the memory of Alina, but allowing it to exist alongside his new happiness. He laughed more easily, spoke more openly, and loved more freely than he had thought possible after his loss. One evening, as they sat together on the porch swing Thaddeus had built as a wedding gift, watching the children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, he took Winifred's hand in his. "You know what Samuel said to me today?" he asked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "What's that?" Winifred replied, leaning comfortably against his shoulder. "He said he couldn't remember the last time my hands were cracked and bleeding," Thaddeus said. "He asked if it was because I'm not working as hard." Winifred smiled, bringing his hand to her lips and pressing a kiss to the calluses that would always mark him as a working man. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I work just as hard," Thaddeus said, his voice warm with contentment. "But happiness makes the work easier." "And love," he turned to brush a kiss against her temple. "Love heals what once was broken. Even calloused hands," Winifred teased gently. "Especially those," Thaddeus agreed, wrapping his arm around her shoulders and pulling her closer. "Though I think it was less the salve you make, and more the touch of your hands that did the healing." As night fell fully around them, and the children's laughter echoed across the Texas plains, Thaddeus and Winifred remained on the porch, his calloused hands holding hers with all the tenderness that had grown between them, a tenderness that had transformed not just his hands, but their hearts and lives as well.